everyone. I'm Kat Margulis, and welcome to Passion Project. Today, I have with me Dan Blank. Dan is the founder of We Grow Media, where he helps writers develop a human-centered approach to marketing and reaching their audience. He is the author of the book, Be the Gateway, a practical guide to sharing your creative work and engaging an audience, and has worked with thousands of writers and organizations like Penguin Random House who support creative people. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. In this era of AI and mass media and mass consumption, I really love that yours is a human-centered approach to marketing and reaching audiences. Tell me what that means.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I grew up as an artist and a writer and a creator, and most of my life, my friends have been performers or writers or creators of some sort. My wife is an amazing artist. And something that I've seen is as we've been given new tools to share what we create and new responsibilities, it's so easy to get tripped up thinking that, well, to market something, I have to use these buttons here and I've got to do the SEO there. Then you've got to do this on Instagram. Then here's the little secret buttons on LinkedIn and Amazon. And it can really spin your wheels sometimes because you have all these lists of things you're told you have to do. But you lose sight of the thing that really matters with marketing, which is word of mouth, which is people feeling a deep connection, telling other people about it, feeling engaged, all of that. So the human-centered approach is to, regardless of what you're doing, even if you are doing an SEO strategy, even that SEO strategy is someone has to see that search result and be interested and click and feel engaged, that there's always a human being as a part of that. So it's putting that as the center of what you do, not only to make it more effective, even though I use all those tools I mentioned, but also make it feel good. And that's something I really think a lot about, which is not as a writer or creator thinking, I've written the book and I'm publishing it. Now I've got to go put on my marketing hat, the hat that I hate to wear, and I will wear this hat for 4.5 weeks. Then I'm going to burn the hat. Just the idea of thinking about how we share with other people should be something that is a part of the creative work. And again, this is something I think about when I would run poetry nights or I was doing art myself, that these people aren't just creating art and kind of throwing it out in a shoot to the world, that there are communities that are talking about it and meeting and conversation. Doesn't mean you have to do those things, but regardless, your work will impact people on a human level. So why don't we just start there?
Yeah, I love that. I wasn't going to ask this next question, but you're taking me there, is this idea of, there's such a focus on the push, the launch, and how human is it then to take that hat off or burn it or throw it away, right? So what's the coaching that you give around like that after? What happens after?
Great question. So when possible, I like to start working with people on a launch like a year ahead of time. Clearly, that does not always happen. So a launch is a wonderful thing because I do think that people are interested in things that are new. There's a bit of fear of missing out. There's people are talking about it. There's a lot of marketing and psychological value there. For the year after, often what we're looking at is we'll think about different quarters and different months, this idea of pacing yourself. So one way we'll think about it is, or two ways to think about it. One is what can be offered that's relating to the book, but is separate from it. So it could be an interview series, it could be an essay collection, it could be another way of attacking the topic. And this works for fiction as well as memoir and nonfiction. You can also look at it thinking of every month as a different mood. And again, or a different emotion, because we think about how we share, and we've all seen this on social media. There's the post that someone's saying, oh, I'm so excited, we got a puppy. And it's easy to like because it's joy. Then there's a post where someone's grieving because their dog passed away. And they talk about that connection. We realize like, oh, all of these emotions are different ways of connecting with people. So sometimes we'll do it very strategically about different programs. Other times I'll think of different emotions. But it's the idea of pacing yourself. I think it's hard to think about a year. It's much easier to think about a quarter and then a month. Some things are pre-scheduled. So if someone has like a newsletter and social media, we can create a really firm schedule with a lot of different kinds of content. But then think of like, what if once a quarter, what's one big thing you're going to do? So you'll have the newsletter, you do this or that, but then once a quarter, could you do a partnership or collaboration? Could you offer a special series? Could you do something that is special? And that keeps it fresh for you and also fresh for people who are already in your audience. And then of course, there's that question of How are you reaching new people? I was
Mm.
working recently with someone whose book came out 2 years ago, and we started working together because she's like, this book has a lot of life left in it. There are so many people who I know. And it was neat to approach that topic from that angle. I've worked with a bunch of people with that. It's just fun to see how, oh, we don't stop promoting books because the book is done. We stop promoting because we got tired of it. So it's a
Mm.
choice.
Yeah, I know. I really, really love that because, yeah, the focus can be on the novelty and the new, but there's probably many more readers to reach. And so, what can you do 2 years later to keep it fresh or interesting? And
Yeah. Sometimes it's the idea of thinking of new audiences. So we're
Mm.
thinking, okay, what are the themes of the book? And we say, well, we went with the obvious one. So if it's just to use memoir as an easy example, oh, we know there's a topic of this, and yeah, you did a pretty good job reaching out to them during launch. So one, there's always,
Mm.
is there more there? Can you go back to them? Is there something to reapproach them with that's fresh? A lot of times they're realizing there are these 4 other sub themes that you haven't touched. So if you went on podcasts on theme A and we're discovering 4 more sub themes, well, there are podcasts in all of those 4 sub themes. There are organizations that talk about that. There are other comparable authors. There are things you can do where you're taking what worked and now you're just moving into the next topic and the next topic. Likewise, you're always brainstorming what is a fresh angle on this? What is something that people are already interested in talking about that allows you to talk about it in a way that feels fresh to you, fresh to them. That's a lot of how I think publicity works. The idea of people want to talk about something already. How are you aligning your work to that thing they already want to talk about? So that's
Mm.
something that never gets old because there's always something new that people want to talk about.
Love that. I love that. Um, maybe maybe we'll back up. Uh, so we have, traditionally published authors. I think you work with the gamut. You work with everybody.
Yes.
Hybrid authors, indie authors. Is there different marketing approach depending on what path you're choosing?
The way that I like to view it is no, is this idea that I try to take an author-led view of this, that
Mhm.
obviously, if I'm working with some of the big publisher, there's a publicity team and we know that they're connected. So they might be able to approach these bigger podcasts, they have ins or they have ins at certain publications. Without question, we'll think about that as how is the publisher support changing things? Obviously, there's some messaging differences where if you think about, oh, I'm an indie author, being an indie author is another angle that you can take in how you can kind of message putting yourself out there, that sort of thing. This is why I like working across genres, across topics, across publishing paths. I think it's amazing to hear what a romance author is doing and think about how do you take it to a nonfiction medical book, or there's something to learn,
Mm.
or what a memoir author is doing and bring that to fiction or vice versa. Or and this is the neat thing, where I'll work with a client who is putting out their 5th book by a major publisher. And what's neat for me, is that privately what you hear is they have a lot of the same insecurities and challenges that a brand new author has. Most people don't see that because you're
Mhm.
hearing that on the back end, but you realize like, oh, there are things I'm doing with that author that's very similar to what I'm doing with a first-time author, and vice versa. So to me, what I like to think of it as, again, is that author-led approach where what are the options that, we have, and then how can we leverage some of these things? And yeah, sometimes we're taking something in that a hybrid publisher is doing and using that with an indie author or vice versa.
Okay, I love it. I want to ask 2 questions. Which one first? Okay, so I want to ask you, what have you seen that you thought has been really cool? Because you're seeing like, oh, I can apply this over here. What have you seen that you really was like that? I'm taking that and I'm going to use that over and over again.
Yeah.
But I'm also interested to hear, probably because a lot of people who are listening may be first-time authors or first-time self-publishing. What specifically can they focus on to get the most results?
Okay. So for the first question, I guess one thing I think about is collaborations. So in a lot
Mm.
of genre authors, there's a big history of collaborations. We're going to do anthologies, we're going to do bundles, we're going to work together. Really well established, very powerful. What I'm seeing in other fields now, one way I'm seeing it is actually through Substack, the kind of newsletter
Mm.
service, where Substack is interesting because they are very writer focused, but they're very big on solving the problem. I'm not sponsored by Substack or anything. It's just interesting for me to look at, where they're trying to solve that problem that everyone's had with a newsletter, which is great. We've given you publishing tools and authoring tools, and you can do a template. You can give all the mechanics. Good luck finding subscribers. You're on your own. And what I see on Substack is more collaborations where people are now feeling a part of the same community. So they're restacking things, or they're feeling, oh, she's on Substack too, and I'm going to be on her email and she'll be on my email, that sort of thing. And I'm seeing that now with more literary authors and nonfiction and memoir, where before I wouldn't have seen that as much at all.
Yeah.
So that is neat to see, is that idea of collaborating, which of course collaborations are, I think, baked into the idea of marketing in general. What was your second question again?
But I really love the collaboration piece. That's really great.
Thank you.
What have you seen? What are some marketing approaches that you've seen, or strategies that you've seen that you really like and are applying as you move forward?
Yeah. I'm trying to think, because there's so many different things. I'm trying to think of what is unique from, one is collaborations, where I do think that people are understanding in a much bigger way that how work is spread is through word of mouth. So they're thinking about, when they put a marketing plan together. Oh, I think you asked about like someone who's brand new coming into it.
Yeah.
Okay. So this does lead in with collaborations, is have colleagues, have other people who who do creative work vaguely like yours. Befriend these people, have colleagues. And that can work in a number of ways. One, it's a great support system. Even if you're writing in one genre, befriending people in a different genre, having someone you can text when you're making a decision around pitching, or you're freaking out about something, or you just feel alone, like, please have colleagues. Don't isolate yourself so much. I know that creative work is often created in isolation. I'm fine with that. But as you think about sharing, don't do it alone if you don't have to. Have that support system. But where it comes into place with marketing is to not just think about the content. Don't just think about, oh, I know I need a website. I know I need a brochure, like that kind of thing, where it's like you're creating an asset that you hope that this asset somehow gets in front of people, and that they magically then read it, click through, read the description, buy the book, all in one step. We trust through people. So think about, on the human level, how can you grow your network? Who are the podcasters, not maybe that you're pitching to yet, but that you love and you're supporting their work, and then you're befriending them. And then because of that, when you do say, oh, my book is coming out, I'd love to be a guest, we could talk about this, there's a familiarity. Or comparable authors, or anything, literary festivals. You can really work this across different genres, but don't just wait until you're pitching people to try to establish even an inkling of a relationship. The more time that you have to develop these relationships, the more you can do come launch, because you have awareness with other people. And that awareness, I think, will make you feel better about connecting. And I think that it empowers other people to know who you are and feel a good sense of that, and really be happy. Like, oh, I remember talking to her a year ago when she was just trying to wrangle this book together, and now it's out. We're going to have her on the show, or we're going to do a special giveaway, or whatever that is.
Love that. I love it. Like, I'm just loving the emphasis on relationships, because like you said, I think there's so much focus on the content pieces and the assets, and they're missing the part about relationships, especially early on in their journey, when they don't have that huge audience to begin with.
And I think too, as I think about, you mentioned AI before, when I think about AI, when I think about social media, there's so much that can make a writer feel small. They have more followers than me. They have more reviews. Oh, AI is going to make it more difficult. Literary agents are saying they receive 1,000 queries a day. Now it's going to be 20,000. There's so much that can make you feel that way. And when you have a connection to other people, suddenly you don't feel as small. You feel a part of something. And that's a part of like a reader community, which is what we all want to be part of.
Love it. I love it. So talking about, those timelines where you were saying, a year would be ideal. What is the strategy for that year? And I know it's, a deep dive, but just broad strokes, people are probably going, what do I need a year for?
Gosh, there's people I work with a lot longer than a year or two. Great question. And it doesn't have to be a year. It can be compressed there's no one path. So one thing we're thinking about is platform setup. So some of the obvious things of where do you need to be? Where do you want to be? There's the idea of messaging. which is how do you message this book? What are the things that you can talk about that are part of who you are, the journey of the book itself, things that are related to that? Then there's the idea of you developing your voice. So some people, a lot of people, oh, I'm on Instagram, and you go to their Instagram and it's like last updated 26 weeks ago. And I'm not making fun of that. It's just the idea of like to develop your voice takes time. And even there, and this is a challenge, but like on Instagram, it's not just you're on Instagram or not. There's the main feed, there's the stories feed, there's the reels feed. And I think the reels feed is the one that really moves the needle for people now. And most normal people avoid that like the plague, because the reels feed asks you to do video of something, maybe video of you, maybe video of something else. And that's a whole nother thing to develop your voice with, or if you're doing a newsletter. So the more time that you have, it's not just what channel should I have? Let me get them set up. But you really figuring out your voice, that can take time as well as analysis. Then there's the idea of the research. So the whole concept of who would you pitch, who is your reader, where are you going to find them, making lists of that. One, it takes time. Then you've got to prioritize it. And then there's some people you want to reach out to early on. So let's say talking with an author and they say, yeah, I want to be pitching podcasts in this area. I think it's a big way to drive book sales. If your first time you're a podcast guest is like a week before your book comes out and you're on the main podcast, like that's not the best time to be figuring out how to be on a podcast. It's much better if you really understand the ecosystem, you've been on a few already, and you've been able to time things. So that time can really benefit. There's obviously a lot of bread and butter stuff you'll do around launch. You're going to like organize your network of people. You're going to email them saying, hey, if you could pre-order the book. Having that organized months ahead of time makes it so much easier, because these are relationships you have. I love when someone has at least one marketing campaign around a book launch. So this is something I define as it's related to the book, but stands alone a little bit. There's a beginning, a middle, and end. So it could be like an in-conversation series. It could be a series of essays. It could be in-person, online. But that takes time to develop. And you want to figure out, does that happen 2 weeks before launch, 2 weeks after launch? Do I want to have partners in that? And we see this a lot in in-person events where I think it's more interesting if it's not just, hey, come to Dan's book launch, but it's Dan's book launch and Dan's going to be here with Kat and they're going to talk about this topic. And we're here in celebration of his book, but we are going to have a conversation about this topic. It gives people 2 reasons to come out to that event. It brings in someone else. It's not just, okay, I'm going to go and sit there and hear Dan read from his book and then watch him sign his book, which is fine, by the way. It just seems interesting. It just seems like a different kind of event. And then, of course, you can brainstorm that a lot of different ways. So those are just some of the things that you kind of plan in like the quarter by quarter build up towards a book launch.
I love it. Yeah, I really love it. I'm like kind of hearing about like the side value. What other value can you bring to your book and your book launch?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the big lessons I think from social media and newsletters too, is I understand the idea of like, I want to step away from my book. I want people to see the book and not me. And that's fine. But I think that what we've seen in the last 10, 20 years is that people do want the behind the scenes story. There's another way to relate to you. And I've talked to authors where like, my friend Lori Richmond, she's a children's book author, illustrator. She has found so many new readers by sharing about her passion for running. Oh, I met with this running group and 3 of those people bought 4 of my books. Because they find out about her through running and she's so passionate. And then you realize, oh my gosh, you're an author. Oh, you do this. It's a whole other way to connect with her. And that's something you realize like, wow, you can sell more books. You can kind of grow your awareness that way. And you're doing with something you truly love as well, even though it's separate from your books.
Oh, I love that. Oh, put it on that. That's great. I want to ask you about TikTok for some reason. And do you have a preference for platform or, promotional platform? Does everybody have to be on TikTok? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, TikTok is so fascinating because we have so many, the conversations I tend to see people have about it is some people love it. A lot of people are terrified of it because again, it asks that thing, which is it's video, it's short form. And then there's this amazing conversation about will it be banned or not? And I think they just, there all this sort of stuff going on, which is interesting of like, should I invest in something that the government is trying to ban? Is that a good thing? That sort of thing. What I find is that no matter what, I think it's good to be literate in that community, especially depending on what kinds of books you're focusing on. So I was working with a YA author recently, and we put a big focus on TikTok because it's very obvious there's a lot of people on TikTok who love YA books. So I think that you don't necessarily have to be posting there if you're not comfortable with that yet, but just going there, you know, going in the search bar and typing, hashtag book talk, see what comes up, scroll for a little bit, watch some of the videos, add a couple extra keywords, being aware that this is truly a community of people who like books. And just learn about that. Doesn't mean that you have to dismiss it outright or embrace it outright. But I think there's a lot to learn there, because one thing I do think that TikTok has taught us is that young people read and they love reading, and that there's so many ways to talk about a book, not just, Dan has written a very moving book. People are on there, they're throwing books, they're showing books, they're all bookmarked up, they're crying. And I love, because I see the whole range of human emotions there. And it might not be for you, it might not be for your book or your audience, but I do think that it's showed us a lot of new things, and you being literate in that tells you a bit about other opportunities you have around sharing your book.
I love that. I love it. What are your thoughts, like, speaking of book talk, what are your thoughts on influencers and collaborating with influencers or creators to help get the word out about your book?
Yeah, I mean, it's become such a funny term, because you hear that term, sometimes you think of like, well, they're fake people being paid to do something, like it's a transaction. I mean, if we think about what we want is to be influential, is someone trusts you. So if I said to you, if you have a book coming out and I say, oh, I run a book club locally, I've done it for 18 years, we have a community of 60 people, I'm influential to a group of 60 people who love reading books like yours. So the concept of an influencer is one that I think every author should care about. Same reason they want to be on NPR, write an article in The Atlantic. They're influential to the audience. So I think in a general sense, you want to think about that. And then you can consider what are the opportunities you have, or what are the kind of influencers like in your field. Sometimes the influencer is another author, or it's someone who hosts a podcast, or it's someone who runs a book club or runs a literary festival. Sometimes it is a real influence, an influencer in the modern sense, where she has 500,000 followers and shares her outfits every day. And she shares, she's sponsored by The Gap and all these other brands, but she also talks about books. And talking with her might be a bit more of a transaction. It might not be, because that's the thing. When you really follow some of these people, you can see that some of it is very transactional. They are paid for a thing. It's a career that they have, but they share a lot of stuff they're just passionate about. And again, it's the idea of seeing the human behind that. These people are doing this because it's a career. I mean, we don't look at accountants or HR representatives thinking they're just doing it because it's a career. They've got to sit there for 8 hours a day. They're doing it partly because they enjoy it, or they enjoy the people they're working with. So yeah, it's a very powerful concept that you should not really ignore.
I love that. What should a self-published author know about preparing for a book launch?
My opinion is to be aware it's emotional. No matter what, if you've written this thing you really care about, and you're responsible for some or a lot of the specific aspects of it, technical aspects, if you have bad days, like, that's really, really, really normal. If things go sideways, that's normal. When you get to book launch itself, I don't see how it can't be emotional in ways, because it's the culmination of things. So just don't be surprised about that. I think to expect that, because I think a lot of people, they feel sideswiped by it, or they feel like they're failing. And I just don't want people to feel that way. I mean, what you're doing is a beautiful, incredible thing. You can't do everything perfectly. And it's an emotional thing. I think about this, I took my little ones going to a new school next year, just going up. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm like, wow, I'm really emotional. Not for a specific reason. It's just a big milestone. Putting your book out there is a big milestone. Beyond that, I would encourage you, like, what to know is, like, make a plan. The plan could be on one side of one sheet of paper, with a couple of dates, a couple of things you're going to do. It can be how I do it, which is a multi-tab spreadsheet that we plan for months. But But give yourself a plan, because what that plan does is it celebrates the few things you're doing. Because there's a lot of things that people are going to say, oh my gosh, you're on TikTok, right? And you're going to say, I'm not. I want you to say, but what I'm doing is I'm reaching out to these 5 podcasts. I've got a great Substack newsletter, and I'm doing a launch event at my local store that I love. That way you recognize you're doing something. There are things you feel good about, and you're going to let go of all those feelings of like, I should be doing this, or that.
Mm.
And it also leaves you opportunity to feel like, well, what else can I be doing, whether it's in between these things or later on. And of course, it would just, bring people on that journey, whether they're people around you, whether it's meeting new people, is try not to isolate yourself, and don't feel bad about talking about what you created, because it's something that should be celebrated.
Love that. I love it. Let's say, just like, what are 3 things that they must, so much is up for grabs. Like, so much is, I want to be on TikTok, I don't want to be on TikTok, or I'm comfortable in front of audiences, or I'm not comfortable in audience. But what are like three things you can't get around, you must do if you want to have a successful book publishing experience, marketing experience, book launch?
I'm so hesitant with that must word, because I love the odd examples, but I think 3 things I would want people to not ignore. To show up in the process, share a bit of yourself, send that email out of saying, my book came out today and I'm emotional, and here's why. And that can be joy emotion. It can be sad. It can be bittersweet. It can be crying. Don't be afraid to show up as a part of that process. I think a lot of people get into that mode that they think about years ago, where it's like, I'm launching the thing and oh, it's great and everyone's excited. And it's like this salesperson kind of role. And I think that there's so much more to connect to when there's a human being behind that. And the more that you share of that, even if you just do it once, but you could do a lot more than that, where you're sharing that side of it, because I think that getting behind people is a part of it. I think you want to get really clear about the messaging of the book. I think a lot of people stop way too short. They get the paragraph that's on the back of the book, and they say, what's your book about? My book is about protagonist. The same thing again and again and again and again, because they feel like I've got this great log line, I've got this great elevator pitch. And that can be important in a lot of situations. Think about 10 different ways into that book, 10 different themes, 10 different ways of describing that process, because it's going to give you a lot more ways of thinking about marketing that book. It'll give you a lot more ways to think about doing any kind of regular messaging, whether on social media or a newsletter. And it gives people different ways into it. If they're hearing about this again and again and again, you're digging into different themes or different characters or different backstory to that. Messaging, I think, is just so important with that. And then what I was saying before is like, make a list of, where do you think your ideal readers are? What are different ways of forging a connection, whether it's something very promotional, pitching yourself on a podcast or pitching a review, or something a little more subtle, which is like, hey, I know you come out with the book and mine is similar to yours. Like, I think that your readers would really like this. If I'm happy to send you a copy. Just even something subtle like that. Those are 3 things I would not want people to ignore.
Yeah, it's great advice. I really love that. What mistake do you see people making? What not to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of times it's the idea of hoping that someone else will make this happen for you. I think that once you realize that it's on you, and I think this is regardless of the publishing path, publishers of all sorts are amazing and they mean well and they're making an investment. They have only so many resources. And in the end, what they want is a partner in that process. And when you think about it as it's up to me, it's not meant to make you feel bad. It's not meant for you to cry out saying, I want to be a writer, not a marketer. It's just that acceptance of, okay, if I want to share this book, I've got to show people how to share this book. What are the conversations that could come from it? If I envision a book reading, what would that night be in the best way? Are we having a conversation? If people are coming up to me, what are they saying to me? And if they're doing that, how can I kind of put that forward? And I think it changes the expectation as well, because you can think about, what are you empowered to do with whatever resources you have? I know that people are swamped with family and work and health and life. So you start thinking about it in a much more rational way about, what can I do at the most basic level? How can I empower other people to do this as well? And then that I think that responsibility as well, then it encourages you to think about like anything beyond that. How can I make this fun? What would be
Mm.
really, what would be a great way to do this? And something I talk with writers a lot about, which is what do they feel good about? And I'd rather double down on something that they really love. Let's do a giveaway. Let's do a really fun giveaway, or we're going to do a newsletter. What would be really something to get people's attention? That not just get people's attention in like a splashy way, but it's just so you know, that sort of thing. That's a lot of times where the magic is. And I think
Mhm.
that when you shy away from that, you try to make it all professional, the professional voice, the professional distance, the apology. Everyone, this is the obligatory note letting you know my book is coming out. I promise you, I will not be bugging you about this. I had to do this one time. Again, I'm not trying to judge people, but like, why are we apologizing to the people who we know that you wrote a book and it's coming out? Why are we already promising that we'll never talk about it again? Like, it just sets a tone that everyone is being told that like you should feel shame about this. You feel shame about it. You're doing it out of obligation. I just want people to feel joy and fulfillment in how they share. So that's
Love
the big
it.
mistake.
I really love it. And I love what you said about showing other people how to share about your work. Like you get to lead it by showing, how you see what feels right for you. So that was really, really great. Um, we might have touched on this already, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just in case. What's one thing or area that often gets overlooked when it comes to book launches that authors might miss?
Oh, it was going to seem obvious, but it's asking for the sale.
Oh, good one.
You know, I mean, this is something I can go into, you know, deeply sometimes, but, you know, really thinking about like, what do people need in order to make a sale? You know, there's the concept of the marketing funnel of people being made aware of something, of people, you know, assessing it, of people buying it, but then even the part after that of advocating for it. That's a big part of the marketing funnel, which is the people who've bought your book. These are people hopefully you want to spread the word about that. So encouraging people to take action, I think, is something a lot of people don't do. They're so busy apologizing and trying not to do that. And to think about the lifespan of that as well. It's something that you just don't want to miss out on. And I understand people's reticence around this. I really do. And of course, I can feel it myself in a lot of ways. But just really telling people like, this is the moment that matters. If I've ever done something that, you know, supported you in what your work, this is how you can support me. Buy the book. Even though I gave you a free copy the other week, buying the book helps Amazon, or helps the bookstore do whatever. Then if you post a review, and what a review does is that when, you know, like really explaining that and telling people what to do and being really clear about why it actually matters.
Love it. I love it. And thank you for sharing those examples of what that looks like. And yeah, I get that. Like there is that kind of thing of, can I talk about my book too much? Like, am I being too forward by asking them to post a review? Is it gross? And like, what's your experience on the consumer side? When you're seeing you're coaching people on it, they're taking action, they're executing it. What's your experience of like how people are receiving that?
So one thing I do with people I work with is we find what I call models for success. These are people who share in a manner that resonates with the author. And oftentimes they could be other authors, but it can be anything. It can be
Mm.
anyone who shares in a way. This is, again, that weird thing that social media has taught us. There are people I follow on Instagram. They're literally posting 20 to 40 stories a day. And you know how I feel? I like it. I expect it. I feel a part of their life. And some of these people have businesses and they are infusing that into their business. Oh, I'm making that pattern that I sell. And oh, here it is on my daughter. And we got this new fabric in and we might use it in the next one. They're just showing you that process. And even though they are truly selling you at many points during that, you like it, because you're seeing why they do what they do. You see the lifestyle, you see behind the scenes, you see all of that. And I think that when you find that, it changes your narrative in your head, which is that to
Mm.
sell is to steal from people, steal their money, steal their attention. You realize people don't mind it if you're doing it in a way that honors your intention, that honors their intention. Maybe you're making it fun or meaningful. Like, I mentioned my wife is an artist. So, we always talk about these artists we see, and I'll follow people on Instagram that I don't particularly love their art. It's not like inherently something that, but I follow them and I watch what they do, and I just see how they share their passion, they share their process, they share their decision making. And then when it comes, they will do multiple posts about selling and it feels authentic and it feels like you're supporting them. And it also feels empowering, like, good for her for building this business out of nothing, for sustaining this business. Like, I feel great when they're selling because I'm like, they're great and I want to see them succeed. I want this to be happening right now.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I love watching artists as well. Like I love it when they show, how this thing comes to be. It's really, really cool. Um, this has been so much fun.
Thank you. I
I
agree.
really enjoyed chatting with you. Before I let you go, is there anything like super, super, super I didn't get to? Maybe I think we touched on anything. Is there anything that you want to share that we didn't get to?
We covered a lot of great areas. Nothing specific that I think wouldn't take us down another big rabbit hole and something that would take another half an hour. You asked really
Yeah.
great questions, though.
Awesome. Thank you. One thing I might ask, and I don't want to do it in every interview, but I feel called to go there, is, this is kind of a capture of where we are right now. You being on the leading edge of this, are you seeing anything developing in the future or anything trending, any trends coming down the pipeline? Is there anything that you're seeing in your crystal ball of what like people who are listening could, um, keep in mind as they're planning a year out or 2 years out?
I mean, the thing that I've been writing about this quite a bit recently, but I spent a lot of time looking at is AI. Um, I I'm 50 years old. I've been an artist and creator my whole life. I've always been surrounded by all the artist, writer weirdos. I've never seen something that has convinced me that the marketplace is going to change in a profound way around creative work, and that the nature of creative work is going to change, and not just in big ways. It's not a matter of like a computer writing a literary fiction, or literary novel, although sure that will happen, just the subtle ways. So for me, I would just encourage people to not dismiss it or embrace it outright. Just keep an eye on this. When you hear about, some of these tools like ChatGPT or Midjourney, whatever, do some experiments. If you read a compelling case study of how it's going to destroy the world or save the world, just look at some more nuance with these things. Anything is possible. I have no idea what's going to happen with it necessarily. But this is a technology that I think is in some ways already very empowering, in some ways horribly terrifying. It begs a lot of questions, but what I'm just seeing is that this is probably going to change the marketplace in a lot of unexpected ways. And just keep an eye on that. And if it is going to change it, don't automatically conclude it's going to change it in a way that closes a door to you. And this, again, I think is why, because I've looked at my own work. I'm like, well, how does it change what I do? And one thing I've thought of, like, well, that human connection is still the thing that that computer can't replace. And that's also why I'm like, okay, that's good. And how does someone leverage that? As you think about putting your book out there, how do you make people more a part of that as this different new technology starts infiltrating the market in ways that we really can't predict yet?
Wow. Yeah. Very cool. I like that. Keep an eye on it so you're in the loop. And don't don't make up a story that it's gonna ruin everything for you and your book, and that that there's an opportunity there perhaps. So love it. Thank you, Dan. So great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching. We have more great interviews on the way, so stay tuned and we'll see you soon. Bye.